Well, hello YouTube, it's me, Fortmaster, and welcome back to another film theory reaction. And also, this is my first film theory reaction of the year because, film theory is always, late for everything. But, that's neither here nor there, and not a dig at them at all. I know, each of the channels has their own schedule. Anyways, this is How to Survive Squid Game. So, God, okay, you know what? I'm going to be completely honest here. Squid Game was one of those shows I could never really get into. Like, it's kind of in that same area that, Breaking Bad and like Game of Thrones, where initially they were very much shows that were kind of in that category where they were so popular that I was kind of pushed back and pushed back from them by, by how popular they were. Not to the fact that like, oh, it's popular, so I hate it. It's more just it's more the fact that it's like, oh man, this is popular, but the things everybody's talking about, like, I don't like that. So I kind of stepped away. And from the bits I have seen, I've seen like 1 or 2 episodes. Again, it's not one of those things that I really like. That being said, I have seen, a lot of the clips and stuff from the show. Man, season 1, like, the old man, he was the guy that's actually behind the game. And, licking the weird toffee cookie thing with the pattern in it to break out the umbrella. And there was the red light, green light game with the machine guns. And, the whole breakable glass pathways thing. So, I mean, but, given that, a lot of the games, at least the ones that I've seen in Squid Game, were, almost like schoolyard level things, I wouldn't imagine it'd be that hard to, survive. All you have to do is, use your brain and not panic, because, when you start panicking, you get clumsy. But, again, that being said, I never watched the first season in its entirely, so I don't know all of the various tasks and challenges they had to do, apart from the ones that were either, shown around a lot or were just memed on a lot. So yeah, I know I'm not going into this with a full deck. But yeah, I mean, if they have any tips for, given that, Mr. Beast is making his own Squid Game, if I ever get on that, maybe it might help. So yeah, of course, as always, original videos linked in the description if you haven't seen it yet for some reason. Seriously, if you're watching a reaction before watching the original video, what are you doing? Corner video linked to my game theory reaction, and yeah, with all that out of the way, let's get this thing started then, shall we?
So, you found yourself in the latest Squid Game, putting it all on the line to win a little cash. Well, listen up, friends. I've got the strategy guide that will help you beat all of the games we see in Season 2. The real question is, will you survive?
Yeah, that's kind of the important part right there.
Mild spoilers for the games in Season 2, and I apologize for the Korean names I'm going to be butchering.
I literally don't care
welcome to
about
Film
the spoilers.
Theory, the show that wants to play a little game. If you can't scroll down and hit subscribe in 5 seconds, I win. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So, how'd you do? I hope you didn't get eliminated. So,
I've been subscribed since the channel was a thing, so I mean, not a concern, really.
Oh, Squid Game. If you were somehow living under a rock and missed Netflix's biggest original series in history, first off, that's impressive. I mean, the show and its scathing critique of the rich, watching the poor literally put their lives on the line for just a taste of wealth, really resonated. And a lot of people, us included, made content about it or celebrated that message, which everyone definitely 100% got, because it was so clear. Like, who could watch Squid Game and think it was actually a good idea to turn this premise into a real reality show where desperate people play these games and end up getting put through allegedly awful conditions? No one's that out of touch, right? Right? Oh, come on! Anyway, if you somehow don't know, Squid Game is a Korean series all about a few hundred players that are taken to a remote island and forced to play a series of seemingly innocent and childish games. The twist? If you lose, you die. But the more people who die, the bigger the pot of prize money that the winners get. Season 2 of the show follows Gi-hoon, the only survivor of the games from Season 1, as he returns to the game, attempting to stop it from the inside.
What I want is to stop the game once and for all.
But of course that...
You'd think that by, stopping the game from the inside, you'd think that would classify, the people running the game, not going through the game yourself again. That's not really, go. I mean, that's the equivalent of, look, I'm going to break it from the inside, and you're going into a literal meat grinder.
It means there's a whole new slate of challenges for the new players in Season 2 to face, because, I mean, you can't just have a season full of the same challenges again, right? In an older theory, we actually went over the best strategies to win all of the games from Season 1, but now that Season 2 is here with a ton of new games both on the island and off of it, I wanted to return to the series and imagine, how would you survive the new Squid Game? If you met the salesman and got shipped off to this island, what are the best strategies to actually make it through? Well, loyal theorists, I did the research and put together a handy-dandy little strategy guide to help you get off the island with just a little extra cash in your pocket. Don't move, friends. We're about to get the green light for this theory. Okay, so first things first, one of the biggest things we really drove home in that last theory was that the Squid Game is not like the Hunger Games. This isn't a battle royale or deathmatch where only one person can be left standing. There can be more than one winner.
Those who win all 6 games will receive a handsome cash prize.
In fact, working together, building alliances, sharing knowledge, and trying to have multiple winners is the best way to survive and get that life-changing amount of money. Go check out that older theory if you want all the details there, but just keep that in mind moving forward, okay? Now, sadly, that's not to say that all the games can't have losers. For example, the first game we see in the series is actually on the mainland, played between 2 prisoners. The pair are forced to play a variant of rock, paper, scissors called rock, paper, scissors -1, where they throw out both hands and then take one hand away for the final result.
Two-handed rock, paper, scissors. Take one hand back. If the one you keep beats their hand, you win.
But there's an added twist. The loser is then forced to play a round of, how can I say
Russian
this without you
roulette.
two getting angry at me? Gun gambling. Yeah, basically they might die if they lose. Now, if you're looking for the strategy on the shooty bang bang part of this, the only real way to win that particular game is not to play. Yeah, that is my professional advice there. It is very stupid and I'm not touching it any further. But as for rock, paper, scissors, there actually is a lot of strategy we can look into here. The first thing we're gonna want to do is figure out which hand to throw out to start with. According to a study at the University of Tokyo, players are most likely to throw out rock as their first move, followed by paper and then scissors. You can use this knowledge to your advantage. Since rock is the most likely first hand to be thrown out by your opponent, you can start with paper to maximize the chances of winning that first round. And if you win that first round, it can start a domino effect. Another study found that if a player wins, they are more likely to play the same hand again. So if you throw out paper and it beats your opponent's rock, statistically you're more likely to throw paper again. Likewise, if a player has lost, especially twice in a row or more, they are far more likely to shift their play to the hand that will beat what their opponent just played. So the loser who threw out rock in that last scenario is far more likely to then throw scissors the next time. So let's think this through. If you won that first round, don't play the same hand again, and instead switch to what would have beaten what you just played. In other words, what your opponent just played.
So, but then the question, so that's for, normal rock, paper, scissors. How does, the -1 part where you throw out 2 and then, remove 1? How does that, are there any studies on, strategies for that? Because honestly, I can imagine that, and then, the winning strategy, put 2 papers out, and then, depending on what your other opponent did, whether they put rock or paper, they're screwed either way, because it's either they lose or it's a tie. But then if, if they did scissors, then, you're screwed either way then.
If you threw paper to beat your opponent's rock, they are most likely to throw scissors to next beat paper. So you throw rock and bam, smash their chances of winning. But if you lose that first hand, your opponent is more likely to throw the same thing again. So you should switch to what would beat it. If they threw rock to beat your scissors, it's statistically best to then switch to paper. I know it's a bit confusing, but you get it? Got it? Great. Because
it's amazing the amount of mind games that go into something as simple as literal rock, paper, scissors.
we also then have the added complication of -1, where you play 2 hands and then take 1 away. Honestly, a lot of the same psychology plays out here, especially given how fast the game goes.
Rock, paper, scissors, -1. Rock, paper, scissors, -1. Rock, paper, scissors!
But there may be a few ways to game this to give yourself a slight edge. First off, never, never, never play the same thing in both hands. This will immediately cut your odds of winning in half, and if your opponent throws out 2 options different than yours, you automatically lose.
Yeah, okay, that pretty much, that throws my idea out the window.
Next, try to search for any patterns that your opponent is falling back on. For example, humans tend to subconsciously choose their dominant hands when doing menial tasks like this, so it may be more likely that your opponent will choose the option that they threw out on their dominant hand. Try to use that knowledge and also randomly switch up which hand you pick to confuse your opponent. If you combine the psychology of how to win rock, paper, scissors that we just discussed above with this randomness, you'll have the best chance of winning this game. So, congratulations, you've survived the first game. It's just too bad that it isn't even actually part of the actual Squid Game, but now that you've been shipped off to the island, we can start the real competition.
Which, just thinking about that, if literally all of the contestants had to win the rock, paper, scissors, that means that the death toll for the Squid Game is literally twice that what we see in the show.
First up is red light, green light, where the players must move forward across a field while the doll has said green light, but you must stop when she says red light. And all of this must be done within a 5-minute time limit. Well, at least in the West. In Korea, this is actually a slightly different game called The Day Hibiscus Bloomed, but I digress. The same strategies apply to both. So,
geez, what a very verbose title.
So the absolute biggest thing you have to keep in mind for this game, even if other people around you are getting shot, you cannot allow yourself to panic, to let your fight or flight take over as others die.
No matter what, do not panic! You can't afford to!
And if you don't panic, you actually have a great chance of winning this without a ton of effort. According to Netflix, the recreation of this field for their reality show spin-off Squid Game The Challenge was 328 feet long, or just under the length of an American football field. Even if the field in the actual Squid Game was double that size, which I'm pretty sure it's not just from eyeballing it, moving at the average human walking speed of 3.25 miles per hour means that you can cover that distance in just over 2 minutes.
Yeah, so unless the doll takes abnormally long pauses when it's a red light, yeah, I don't think you're at any danger of, like, hitting the time limit.
So the best advice here is to just take your time, be calm, and just walk. And whatever you do, don't run. You're much more likely to either trip or just not stop in time if the doll turns around quickly. It's not worth the risk. Now, I should also address the strategy Gihon instructs the other players to use here in Season 2. He tells smaller players to line up behind larger ones to minimize the chance that they won't be seen moving.
So if you're short, line up behind someone who's taller than you! Single file, like you're forming a conga line!
Now, I'm not sure I would go as far as to say that everyone should play like this, because it's incredibly dangerous. All it would take is just one person making a mistake or sabotaging other players for several people to die, exactly like we see with Thanos. But if the entire group is playing together to survive, if someone's not playing this like a zero-sum game, this could be worth the risk. At the very least, if you're on the smaller side, moving behind a larger player will help protect you. And if you're a larger player, you could easily start to form alliances here by protecting other players. Either way, it could also tell you the character of other people in the game, which will help you in the future if there are any team activities. Speaking of which, so you've survived the free-for-all red light, green light, but the next game is completely different. The Six-Legged Marathon, where a group of 5 minigames are played by groups of 5 with their feet all strapped together. So how do you form a team here to maximize your chances of survival?
We need to find a team. That's the next step.
Well, going in, you're not going to know what these games are, so you can't really group up based on the skill sets you think you're going to need. The games could literally be anything. Logic puzzles, tic-tac-toe, drawing, running.
Look,
oh god. Deadly tic-tac-toe. If they ever make a season 3, I would actually pay for Netflix to see that.
what, that one? Because he looks like a runner? I told you, we don't know if it's a race.
Trying to diversify your skill sets based on the games you're predicting is a fool's errand, so it's better to partner with players that you trust or players with calm heads. If you want an example of that working really well, just take a look at this team. On the face of things, they may not seem like they're that great, but because they trust each other, it really works out. We have Young-sik, who refuses to abandon his mother Gwam-ja, who herself is empathetic and looks out for other players. Young-mi specifically wants to partner with Hyunju, partially because of her heroics in the previous game, and in return, Hyunju inspires confidence in Young-mi during the game, helping them all win. The only odd one out is Seon-nyo, and even she gets the motivation she needs from the other players. They all work together, pool their knowledge and abilities, and end up winning as a result. On the other hand,
how you do
there's
it.
this situation.
I don't trust you. You're nothing. You're dead to me.
Junhee refuses to partner with Myunggi because of their personal history and relationship drama. Now, don't get me wrong, her feelings are entirely valid, but at the same time, Myung-gi is very invested in her survival because she's pregnant with their child. This is a situation where putting those feelings aside might be worth it because he desperately wants you to win. So, okay, you have your team, but before we hop into the games themselves, we need to talk about the marathon between them since you're gonna have your legs strapped to your teammates.
Yeah.
How do you best approach this? Well, the players in the show actually figure this out pretty quick, counting their steps out loud. This helps them coordinate so they don't fall over and waste valuable time. Nextly, if you
Yeah, I was okay. So when I thought of that, I was I was literally going to say, oh, say like left, right, but that would only work if there's only two of you. As soon as you get more than that, then everybody's. Yeah, so just counting out steps, that's probably the best. Yeah.
or a teammate fails at a game, don't panic and don't yell. Collect yourself or encourage your teammate, reset the game, and try again. If you need to move forward to collect a piece before you reset, don't bother turning around. It'll be easier and quicker if you just walk backwards, just like we see in the show. And finally, if you're lucky enough to be on a team that goes later on, make sure you watch the other players. Observe what works and what doesn't. Emulate the strategies that succeed and avoid what fails. You have a massive advantage if you're going so late, so use it. Now, let's talk about the individual games here in the Six-Legged Marathon. First up, there's Gongi. You'll recognize this one from Season 1 since it's what the salesman used to recruit people. This game involves two paper squares. One is put on the ground while the player throws the other square onto it, hoping to flip it over. So, how do we go about doing this one? Well, your first instinct might be to throw your square as hard as you can onto the other, but
yeah, I was... This is why it's good to hold off when you're about to pause the video. I was literally just about to say that.
This comes with a bit of a risk. To build up the most momentum, you may end up flicking the square and end up hitting the one on the ground with the edge or corner of your square, since this is the fastest and hardest way to throw it. This is actually how professional card throwers do it and are able to cut things with their cards. But that is not the move for this game. It's going to do little to actually flip it, since all of the kinetic energy from your throw is going to be concentrated on just the corner or edge of your square. Instead, what you need to do is focus on trying to slam the face of your square onto the other, towards the center of the paper. This will transfer the maximum amount of kinetic energy over the widest area and focus it downward. Since the square is on the ground, it can't go down, so instead the kinetic energy will rebound, helping to bounce the square. Additionally, since the squares are made of folded paper, there will likely be puffy parts from the folds towards the center of the squares. Even if they're small, this will end up creating itty-bitty pockets of air that you can use to your advantage. Hitting this with a large area will push the air down and out of the square before air rushes back in to fill that space. Doing this with both squares will get you the best rebound of that kinetic energy. We actually...
yeah. And even there's then, like, the folded paper, it's, of course, like, unless you're going, like, absolutely, like, mental with, like, ironing out the folds and stuff like that, there's going to be some, like, little bits of kinetic energy stored in the folds, and on top of the air, you're going to have the paper acting itself as a little bit of a spring. So, compress, and then you're going to get that little bit of, that little bit of bounce on top of everything.
We see this in the show, though they don't explain why it worked.
Wait a minute, Young Mi. Try with it flipped. Use the other side.
Young Mi hits the square flat with the side that's folded, giving it enough energy to bounce and flip. Do something similar, and you win. Great work.
Okay.
Next up, flying stone. Here you have a stone, and you just try to throw it at another stone several feet away to knock it over, all without stepping over a line. It's a little bit like horseshoes, trying to throw something to hit a target. Honestly, the game here is super simple, and the trick is just to not overthink things.
Again, like, they keep saying, oh, don't overthink things. And, of course, going into something like this, a literal death game with a calm head, is probably the best thing to do. But at the same time, saying don't overthink things and be calm is a lot easier said than done when, death is literally on the line.
Take your time to aim. Though it works for some players in the show, avoid overhand or underhand throws. You might get more power from those throws, but that's better for long distances than for aiming. Instead, flick your wrist like you're throwing a playing card, basically like the opposite of Gongi. It's also important to remember your placement and your stance, just in case you miss. If you do, it's not the end of the world, and in fact, now you have an idea idea of the corrections you need to make to hit the stone. If you place your feet on specific parts of the rainbow racetrack and use the line you're not supposed to cross as a frame of reference, you can make sure you're in the exact same place for your second throw if you miss. It's also worth noting that the rules here are vague. We see a couple players win this challenge despite bouncing their throwing stone off the ground. So if you're concerned about your throw being powerful and accurate enough to knock over the other stone, it may be worth tossing the stone lower to the ground.
Or you never know, if the rules are pliable enough, just go curling, just like skip the stone across the floor.
And flicking it like you're trying to bounce a pebble on a lake instead of just lobbing it.
Okay, there
This
you go,
will
right.
get you more horizontal force in a more controlled direction and hopefully enough momentum to knock over the standing stone. Okay, that's 2 out of the 5 minigames won. Great job! Now we get to Gongi, which is similar to the Western game of jacks. Here you have small stones that you...
I've never played jacks before. Actually, I've never had jacks. Like, where do you even get them? Because, like, I'd imagine, I think maybe, thinking back, I maybe have seen them, like, maybe once or twice going through, like, the toy stores, like one of those little bags you see hanging off the side of the shelf, just as, like, one of those, like, impulse buy things. But yeah, I've never had jacks, not even as, like, a stocking stuffer for, like, Christmas or anything like that.
You need to pick up in bigger and bigger groups as you throw others up into the air. So picking up 1 stone at a time, then 2, 3, then all 4. It's a bit of a complicated game. I'd recommend checking out a tutorial like this one from Miss Vicky if you want to learn the ins and outs. Traditionally, Gongi is considered a game for schoolgirls, but that shouldn't be an assumption you make when choosing who to play this.
It's a game for schoolgirls, okay.
Instead, choose either the most dexterous person or the person who has the most practice with the game. We see this in the show. It makes no sense to put Junhee on this game just because she's a girl, when Daeho is both dexterous thanks to his background as a Marine and has a lot of experience with the game thanks to growing up with a bunch of sisters. The main thing to make this game easier for yourself is going to be trying to keep the stones as close together as possible, so you don't need to move your hand in a large distance to pick them all up. Notice in Miss Vicky's video here where she goes for the stones closer together when she needs to pick up groups of 2 stones at a time. Then when she needs to pick up 4 at a time, she lays them as closely together as possible. That way, she's not trying to zip all around and pick up everything across the whole game board while the stone she threw is up in the air. Finally, if your team is lucky enough to go after a bunch of other teams, there's nothing to say you can't practice while you wait. You should absolutely take this time to pick up small pebbles and play a bunch of practice games, building up your muscle memory for the actual game when the pressure's on. Now that you've beaten...
Jesus, okay, so even just all that, it's almost like the writers of the show, were very, knew what they were talking about.
In Gongi, the rest of the games are actually going to be much easier. Case in point, next up we have spinning top. Here you'll have to wrap a string around a top, launch it, and then have it land all while spinning. It's basically like Beyblade. Tops like this work due to the principle of conservation of angular momentum. Basically, when an object is spinning, it will continue to spin on that same axis unless stopped by something else.
That's one of those things, Beyblade. Like, I had, like, a couple of Beyblades when I was really little. Didn't do much with them. And I remember the anime. But I had no idea they were still technically a thing. Like, where can you get Beyblades? Yeah, okay, yeah, you can get them from Walmart, Temu, of course, Amazon, Canadian Tire, what? This brings back so many memories.
Like friction or gravity. The axis of the top is its tip, so as long as you can get it to land on that point while it's spinning, it will continue to spin and you'll win the game. Just keep calm and keep your hand steady as you wrap up the top. You're also going to want to use your dominant hand when throwing the top to maximize the amount of control you have. We actually see the front man using his right hand, his non-dominant hand, while trying to throw this game and make Gi-hun lose, before he switches to his left hand and immediately wins. Also, similar to Flying Stone, this one will be much easier.
Why was he trying to get him to lose?
If you release the top lower to the ground, you'll have way more control of whether it'll land on its tip and keep spinning rather than just throwing it wildly up into the air, giving it a chance to rotate and land on its side. Honestly, this is probably the easiest game by far, and I wasn't a huge fan of it. You could tell that they had to manufacture drama with this game precisely because it was so simple. Xian is traumatized by seeing blood on the ground and freaking out, and the frontman tries to sabotage Gi-hun's group by intentionally failing killing. It just seems like it didn't fit with the other games and the skill they required, but I digress. Anyway, this brings us to the final game of the six-legged race, Jeggy. This is basically kind of like hacky sack here in the West. To win this game, you need to bounce a paper Jeggy off your foot 5 times, with your foot touching the ground in between each bounce. Now, most people might think that you should go about hitting a Jeggy or hacky sack with the side of your foot, which does have the potential to launch it much higher into the air. But this also comes with a lot of risk. It makes it much harder to control where the Jeggy is going and might make it more likely that you'll lose your balance and fall down. So instead, hit the Jeggy with the top of your foot. This has a much larger surface area for a potential hit, and by lifting your foot directly up instead of angling it, it's going to be much easier to control.
Easier to hack because I just send it straight up in the air again.
You just want it to go straight up.
You know, it's really funny. Like, you have Tom here. He's putting like so much effort into like explaining like, oh, this is how you survive. This is how you do this. At the end of the day, again, these are all quite literally like elementary school recess and like children's games and stuff like that. And I know it's like part of the brand, and also, you know, about Squid game, but I can't help but feel that he's putting like just a little too much gravitas in all of this.
Physical movement of this is also much quicker, easier, and conserves your energy. Using this method, hitting the Jeggy 5 times should be a cakewalk. So great job. Give yourself a round of applause because you just survived the six-legged marathon. But it also means that you've made it to the third and so far final game of Season 2, Mingle. In this game, the platform at the center of a large room will spin, and when it stops, the announcer will call out a number. At this point, all of the players must split off into groups of that many players and enter smaller rooms all along the walls. If you aren't in a room by the end of 30 seconds, or have too many or too few players in your room, you lose. Alright, so this game's a bit tough and might test alliances, but this is where the idea of there being multiple winners, of Squid Game not being a zero-sum game, is really gonna come in clutch. Now, your first thought here might be to have an alliance with enough people that could manage to evenly split between all the numbers that they could call, but that just isn't realistic. In the show, the numbers they call out are 10, 6, 4, 3, and 2. Out of those, the fewest number of players in an alliance you'll need to survive every possible combination is 60.
Oh,
which
60.
just frankly isn't going to happen considering the tensions amongst the contestants already. But consider this, that 10 is far and away the outlier of these numbers. And between all of the other numbers called out during the game, the lowest common multiplier is actually just 12 players. Finding an alliance that can work with just 12 is much more achievable. But it's a bit of a moot point because you're not going to know the numbers that are called out before playing the game. So,
65! What?
So, what do? Well, easy. Still work with your alliance. Even if you don't know the numbers going in, and just have an alliance of like 9 or 10 people that you trust. Like, say, 2 teams from the Six-Legged Marathon that like each other. Assuming that any number they call out is going to be 12 or fewer, that's going to be very easy to work with. Like, sure, not all of them. It's not going to evenly divide amongst any possible number called out. But most of them will. And that really shouldn't be an issue because of the sheer number of people that are going to need to be in a group. You can just grab a straggler or 2 that aren't in another group if you need more people, or loan some of your own people to another team if you have too many. Hell, you might even make some new allies out of this because people are going to be grateful for you and your team for saving their lives. For example, consider this. Let's say you have 10 players in your alliance and the announcer calls out for 6. If you split your team evenly into 2 groups of 5, that means that each group only needs to
one
find
more person,
one additional player to bring in. It's much easier for a group of 5 to attract one extra person with no group in this scenario than it would be for a group of like 2 or 3 to find 3 or 4 extra people. The same goes for if the announcer calls 4 or 3 or 8. Splitting your alliance as evenly as you can will yield the best chance that you'll be able to find enough stragglers to fill your rooms. The only real challenges here would be larger odd numbers like 7 or 9. There will be a few stragglers from your alliance that will have to break off, but if they go individually, well, then they're the one extra person for another group. And again, it's far more likely that they'll find a room that needs one extra person than it would be for a group of 3 or 4 to find a group of 6 or 7.
God, I swear, again, it's just, I honestly, I can say, oh, this is all like, you know, super simple stuff. But again, at the same time, you know, high stress environment, I don't think I'd be able to figure this out, at least not unless I was like given some hint beforehand and it's like, had been given some time to think. This stuff, this is, honestly, you know, again, I don't think I'm going to actually, you know, be in a circumstance where this is necessary, but, you know, again, it's always good stuff to know.
It's all about just breaking the numbers down to as small and evenly split as you can get. And there you have it. Follow that advice and you have the best chances of surviving all of the games we've seen so far in Squid Game Season 2. Though, if you really want the best advice I can give, just don't play. I joked about this at the top of the episode, but Squid Game is a brutal critique of the divide between the rich and the poor, and how uncontrolled wealth inequality puts the have-nots against one another for the amusement of the haves. You don't have to give in and play that game, and instead you can try to change the system. Even if that is way harder than it sounds, just like Gi-hoon is learning this season. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory.
Yeah.
And cut.
So yeah, you know, at the end of the day, if I ever do get the chance to go on a murder game show sponsored by the rich to, you know, kill off the poor for their own enjoyment using children's playground games, I will be, you know, much more... I'll have a much better chance of actually doing it. Again, I can completely understand why people enjoy the show. I mean, this isn't like some other things in the past where I've been like, I've questioned why people understand. Like, I understand, you know, like the grit, like why people enjoy it, like the suspense, is he actually going to get it? Who's going to die? You know, that sort of stuff. And at the end of the day, I mean, Squid Game just isn't for me. And at most, I'm just going to watch, you know, people joking about it, making parodies, maybe look up a clip or two on YouTube. But yeah, that's definitely going to be it for now. So yeah, of course, as always, original video is linked in the description if you haven't seen it for some reason. Corner video will lead to my game theory reaction. And yeah, with all that out of the way, I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if not, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.